as we move on to a new section in Tanya. I have to leave at 1 o'clock. With general, I want to try to keep the class to 1 hour. Ira started laughing last time when I said I want to keep it to 1 hour. But I need
there's no choice. His wife is upset with him, Ira. We've got to keep it to 1 hour.
If you want this class to continue, we need to keep it to 1 hour. Okay, I'm just kidding. My wife, remember, watches it sometimes on Facebook, so we also have to speak very nicely about it. Anyway. Okay, so so let's talk about this. I would encourage everyone. Rabbi Tao, who I love his Tanya classes. I get a nice overview and clarity in a lot of the ideas. It's called Soul Words, the one I brought him to speak here, soulwords.com. I'm going to share with you some of his ideas. I listened to it before, and that's how I was able to understand a little bit of today's Tanya. So what we've been talking about in short, to try to get an understanding on it, what we've been talking about in short is that here's what we've been saying. The Beinoni knows that just say no. The Beinoni knows that that he has to control his emotions. I guess I'm getting a text from someone that's watching it on Facebook Live, I guess, about what we're talking about here. So Yossi Kuba, we love you. Very good. So he's watching the class live and texting me. Okay, awesome. He's telling me it's because Moshe was Sephardic. I don't know how that, so how does that answer the question? I'm not sure. So he would argue? Is that what you're saying? Is that what Yossi, I think Yossi, that's what you're trying to say. Okay. You can join our Zoom, and we'd love for you to join and clarify to us what you mean. But awesome. I'm happy you're here with us on Facebook. Good. So here we go. So here, listen to the Tanya. Very powerful stuff today. Because we're getting into meditation. We're getting into meditation, and that's why this is so important. So until now, we've said in the Beinoni, the number one tool the Beinoni has is you have to be disciplined. I don't care if your emotion's there or not, you must be disciplined, and you have to do what you have to do when you need to do it, okay? But what's the problem? There's a major problem with that. So let's say hand is our insides, is our emotions, and this hand is our outsides, is the way we act. So we're telling you, don't care about the insides, don't care about your emotions, just do what you need to do. Just do the act on how you need to act. What's the problem? It's like a rubber band. The rubber band is pulling. So, right? So your insides are one place, and you're acting how you need to act, right? I could totally identify with this. I know how I need to act to be a Yid. And I need to do what I need to do, and I need to live up to this level, and the Beinoni needs to control himself, but the rubber band is stretching and stretching and stretching and stretching, and it's like I'm doing what I need to do. It's because I need to white knuckle it, that I'm stretching, but my emotions in one place and my act is in another place, and it's just going in two different directions. So at this point, the guy would come to the Alter Rebbe, as he says, writing the Tanya, and say, Alter Rebbe, we have a problem. Like, you know, what's going to happen? Either the rubber band's going to snap, which means you'll fall back down to where you started from. Theoretically, I could keep it up, but it's very, very, it could get harder and harder. Or slowly the rubber band will pull the action back, and maybe it won't snap, and you could lose everything, but maybe it'll pull it a little bit back to each other, but it's a major problem. So we need to come into the next part of meditation, which will help us change our insides too, so that we could put our insides and our action on the same wavelength, and not that they're going in two different directions. So we must get our emotions in check with our actions. And I would say more than that, we need that the actions should not be in spite of our emotions, but should be because of our emotions. So our emotions should be causing the actions to happen. They shouldn't contradict each other, but they should actually come. Why? Because when you do an act because you're emotionally like it, your act is different than when it's done because you're excited about it and you want to do it, versus because you have to do it. So if I tell my kid, take out the garbage, and he does not want to do it, the way he takes out the garbage is very different than when he's in the mood and wants to show his love for me, and he goes and he takes out the garbage 2 different ways. Right? Remember, I gave an example, when you, especially when you hate somebody, and someone got sued and they have to give a check to somebody versus when they're giving them a gift for their bar mitzvah, a check for their bar mitzvah. It's very different how they give it, how it's given. So we don't want just that you're right, you have to do, the number one rule is you do have to do whether you're there or not. But the number 2 step is, once you're doing what you need to do, you can't wait to get your emotions in check, in line with your actions. Your actions have to be correct, even if your emotions are not there. But then the second step is that you need to get it, that your emotions and actions are not going so far apart, and your actions will come because of your emotions. You'll do a mitzvah because you want to do the mitzvah, and your mitzvah will be a different mitzvah when you do it because you want to do it versus taking out the garbage, and I have no choice but I have to do it. I love how Rabbi Taub said, I love when he said, he's like, it makes great publicity for Judaism and for God when you have a bunch of people doing mitzvahs that they don't want to do, So the guys are all acting out of mitzvahs when their emotions and their action are not in check with each other. What does it look like when you do a mitzvah like that? And everybody sees how the guy is doing the mitzvah. You think they're going to want to do mitzvahs too? They're going to look at you and it's going to be very bad news if that's how the Jewish people are keeping in Torah mitzvahs because they have to. So we have to get the insides and the outsides in check with each other. So we're going to start talking about meditation. And he said a line which I loved, understanding what does meditation mean, because often when you hear the word meditation, it's high fluky stuff, like, I don't know what you think about I don't know what comes to mind when you hear meditation, all kinds of stuff on the line and the internet, and people do stuff. To me, right away, it brings up weird ideas in some areas, not everywhere. But I loved how he said it's basically digging deeper into yourself. That's what you're doing. You're digging deeper into yourself, that you're finding stronger energy, stronger recesses. So when we're challenged in life, how do we overcome successfully that challenge without going crazy, without becoming mishagayim? You find a deeper part in yourself that you could tap into, and then that helps you deal with whatever you're dealing with. So meditating, if I understood this correctly, I loved it. I just this morning, as I was learning the Tanya, I was really trying hard to understand the Tanya well. I actually had a very hard time with this Tanya. I'll tell you why soon. But I love the idea that meditating is to reach into a deeper part in your neshama, in your heart, in yourself, and that gives you the ability to overcome and withstand whatever you're trying to deal with. So let's say, with kids, you're having a hard time with your children. You need to. Maybe meditating gets you more in touch with yourself, and then by getting more in touch with yourself, or in our case with Hashem, you and Hashem, you're now can overcome much greater obstacles that you didn't have the potential ability to overcome before. Very powerful, very beautiful way of understanding. I think this is in building. If you want to build a higher building, you got to create a deeper foundation, right? The higher the building is, the deeper the foundation has to go, is an analogy that I would perhaps use. I mentioned this idea to my wife, and she's like, maybe also that means deep in touch with yourself. Sometimes you have skeletons in the closet, and when you're dealing, let's say, with your kids, you got to dig up those skeletons, figure it out in order to know why externally you're acting the way you're acting. It's because there's something wrong with the deeper part of yourself inside. So getting in touch, meditating, is getting in touch with the deeper part of yourself. Meditate to get in touch with the deeper part of yourself in order that you could then overcome whatever obstacles in life that you're coming. So the obstacles are going to cause you to get in touch with the deeper part of yourself, right? Beautiful idea. So in short, in Chassidus, we want to call this a love of Hashem and fear of Hashem in order to generate the mitzvahs that you're doing. But now we have to understand something else. There's 2 kinds of emotions and feelings you want to have. And I want to use maybe the example of the furnace, right? I'm actually in my basement and I hear the furnace running all the time. So what happens is the fire lights in the heater, in the furnace, in the heater in my basement, and it starts flickering, and a nice fire comes out. And then not always, sometimes it misfire, it doesn't light, it needs another chance or 2 to light, and it lights the fire to the furnace in the basement, and a huge fire comes on, and my whole house, all 3,000, whatever, it's a little under 3,000 square feet, get heated by the fire. So the pilot on its own would not, Lana probably understands this example, her husband has an HVAC company, so it's a perfect example. Then you call Doug. If it doesn't light, you got to call the HVAC guy in order to light it. So So what happens is that if you can light up the heat, the furnace gets caught, and all the fire's running, that heats up the whole house. It's amazing. You could heat up in a few minutes. It could take up a few notches the levels of heat in the house and raise the temperature. But if it doesn't catch, there's a fire there that's lit, but it'll never heat up the whole. It'll have a fire, but it'll never heat up the whole house, right? But I think it's a decent analogy. We have two levels of emotions which we can dig deep into, right? So in the meditating, it could reach two levels of emotions. There is a level of emotion which is intellectual emotion. That's what we want to say. What does it mean? And this is what I was trying hard to understand today, and I think I kind of understood it. So we talk about the emotional emotion. It's literally palpable in your heart, right? It heats up the house. Your heart just skips a beat. The emotion is so strong, your body is affected by it. It's physical, right? It's physical. You're in such love that your heart is moving faster, your blood is pumping faster, it's touching you physically. It's making your body different. Your body's changed, you feel it. Or you're scared of something, you're literally afraid of it and your body's shaking. It's literally, it touches your heart touches you so strong, it touches your whole body, it moves you. That's like the heater that's on fire. So when you act out of that fear or love, the act is amazing. Like taking out the garbage with that kind of love, like, whoa, he's like going to grab the garbage and run out of the house and his whole body feels the love for taking out the garbage. Or he's afraid of something so much he's locking the doors to his house because he's afraid he heard something on the news and now he's all scared. Literally affects your body. Your physical body is carrying that emotion. But then there's a lot of other things in life that do not affect us so physically, that emotion, but intellectually we know it. So you could be stimulated, you could have an intellectual emotion that doesn't touch your heart, doesn't actually touch the body, but it's very real and it's there intellectually. Once it touches the body, man, then you're on fire and you're running and so on. But many people don't get that. It's possible that you will not get that. And don't expect it, not because you don't know how to meditate, but simply because your intellect, not because you don't know how to meditate, it just could be your body's not cut out. It could be you're just more of a number person. You don't have that emotional ability in order to do it. It's very interesting how you could only get it intellectually. And we're talking today to the person that even cannot generate those emotions physically. It can be very hard to have those emotions to God physically in the same way you're scared of something physically. God forbid, you're scared of a storm or something. You're in turbulence. Your body literally feels it. To get that level of Hashem, you might not get it, but at least intellectually, everybody could stimulate that emotion. Why? Why could you intellectually stimulate that emotion? From what we learned in Tanya in chapter 4. What did we learn in Tanya chapter 4? That your mind controls your heart. So very interesting. There's two steps to your mind controlling your heart. Step A in mind controlling your heart is that you always you're never controlled by your emotions. Even if you have no emotions, you could still control yourself. You do what's right when you need to do it. But now we're telling you your mind controls your heart for step 2. Anyone can generate the passion and love to Hashem intellectually, if though not emotionally, you could stimulate it intellectually, at least in an intellectual stimulus. So you might not be able to turn on the oven, the heater in the basement on the full force, but you can always have the pilot. You can always get it there. What would an intellectual stimulus look like? So one of the words is appreciation. I appreciate that. I could be taught to appreciate it. I might not turn on the fire in love physically, but I at least could always learn to appreciate something. And once I have an appreciation for it, not just to say, okay, I have to do it. No, I could explain to you that you could appreciate you need to clean up your room, because it's the right thing to do. You might not feel emotionally connected to cleaning up physically in your heart. Cleaning up the room might not generate your heart to start beating faster, but you could appreciate it, that it's not hard for you to clean your room anymore, because once you great appreciation for you, what's happening now, your insides and outsides are not so far apart anymore. Your insides, your emotions, and your action are not pulling like a rubber band, because the appreciation, at least intellectually, for the act you need to do makes sense to you, and you have the understanding and a little bit of love and fear in your mind, though it's not fully in your heart. So step 1 is do what you need to do. Even if you have no appreciation for it, you have to do it. Even if it's against your will and against you could and you must control yourself. Step 2 is do it, even though that at least gain appreciation for it, an intellectual stimulus of love and fear for it, and that is what we're saying in today's Tanya. I'm going to go through at least quickly the yes, because we started from Shabbos' Tanya, so we're actually going back. Tomorrow, God willing, I'll have enough time to catch up on today's Tanya too. But let's at least get started so we're not too far behind, because we are going to, with Hashem's help, stop the class at right about 1 o'clock. I'll give myself another minute or two, but let's see if we could at least do the first section of Tanya, which is yesterday's, which we didn't do yet. So it's the beginning of chapter 16, which talks about the emotional, the meditating part of now getting our insides to match our outsides. I'm sorry, I have to go back one day. I have to go back to Shabbos portion, and then we'll leave it at that. Okay. V'zeh klal gadol, chapter 16, beginning of chapter 16. V'zeh klal gadol ba'avodas habeinani. This is the general major rule for a beinani, the intermediate person. The ikar hu. The main thing is limshav v'lishleit al hateva sheb'chol ha'asmali. His main job in life is to rule over the animalistic, gluttonous tendencies, the left side of his heart, the tendencies that he has. Hameir ayidei, how? How are you going to do it? Not just by saying control, discipline, you go crazy eventually. Al Yidei or Hashem, the light of Hashem, Hameir l'nefesh l'kis, that comes from the godly soul, Shabbat in his mind, because at least you could get in touch more easily with the godly soul in the intellect. Lishleit al alei, that it should control the heart. So don't just say no. You are in control, but don't just say I have to do what I have to do, even though I totally don't get it. You could gain an appreciation, somewhat of a feeling intellectually, love and fear of what needs to get done. So at least you have some emotions involved, and your emotions are not totally haywire in a different place than your actions. How? When you meditate in your mind on the greatness of Hashem, what do you meditate about? You think about God. Stop for 5 minutes and think about the greatness of Hashem intellectually. An appreciation. Get an appreciation intellectually for God. To give birth to intellectual, think about it, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Use all the methods which we explained in Tanya, in the earlier chapters of Tanya, how the brain can create intellect, how thinking can create emotion, create a fear of Hashem. Wow, look how great God is everywhere. Now get us a little bit of emotional stimulus in your intellectually. That emotion will give you the push to not want to sin a biblical or rabbinic prohibition. Even a small sin you won't want to do, because at least you have some emotional, intellectual stimulus. You have some appreciation for the mitzvahs. The love of Hashem will control and enter the left side of the ventricle of the heart, where the animal and you sides. With a yearning and a drive, the dafka boy, to connect to Hashem. Now you also love, you realize the greatness of Hashem, you want to connect to Him. How do you connect to God? We also spoke about this in Tanya already a few times. How? By doing kima mitzvahs, by doing the mitzvahs, the Raisa v'Darabbanan, the biblical and rabbinic mitzvahs. Talmud Torah connected kulam, and the greatest mitzvah of all is the Torah, is the greatest way to connect to Hashem. And you have to know this rule in the Beinani. He has to know this rule. But even if you can't reach the love of Hashem physically in your heart, like the furnace cannot generate to turn on and heat the whole house with this major fire, you're not able to get the same fear you have in your heart from turbulence. Let's say if you're that kind of person, or fear of heights, or love, you cannot get it physically in your heart. The Beinani has to know that, and he can't get his heart like a burning fire, like the furnace. He can't get the palpable, physical, emotional connection to Hashem. But the hidden love of Hashem, he could all get at least the hidden love of Hashem to start to turn on the fire, to at least get it intellectually, at least have an appreciation intellectually for it. And it could be why. That's where his soul comes from. As the Alter Rebbe says in the note here, that the kind of brain and emotions he got were not such that he can ever stimulate that in his heart. We're not going to get into the no for the limited time we have. But at least his mind can understand his wisdom and understanding. He understands clarity intellectually. Everyone can do that. Can get a clarity intellectually and understanding into the mitzvahs, into God, into why you're scared to go against him. You have awe of God, respect, and also love of Hashem. Gedula saying Tzayid Baruch Hu, into the greatness of Hashem, the Kula Kameklei Chashim Mamish, that you could, by meditating on this, getting it deeper in touch with the deeper part of yourself, that the whole world is nothing relative to God. Everyone could reach that level of meditation, that depth. And therefore, because everything's nothing relative to God, God's the source of life of everything. Everything just wants and yearning is therefore to connect to Him. The soul that's in your body also wants to leave the body, get out of the animal, and wants to connect to Hashem. But it's against their will. They don't have the option. They're stuck in the gluttonous body, the animal that they're stuck in this world. He says it's like a widow whose husband, in Jewish law, you can't get married unless you get a divorce, unless you get a get. So imagine a woman, God forbid, who doesn't know where her husband went, and now she can never get married. A 19-year-old girl went and got married. The husband disappeared. They don't know what happened to him, and now she's stuck. So the soul, it's an example of the soul, is stuck in the body against its will. It has no choice. It really wants to connect to God, but it can't because it's stuck. It's married to the body. Like, God forbid, imagine someone's in a very bad marriage and they can't get out of it. That's how the soul feels. I'm married to the body and I can't leave it. I want to connect to the Hashem. That's where your meditation could lead you, to realize that you want to connect to Hashem. And no one could connect to God. You can't get back together with God. Only how can you get the connection to Hashem when you connect to the Torah and mitzvahs? Only when you could connect. So you want to get married to God. You want to have that connection. You got to do Torah and mitzvahs. That's the way you can do it. So you meditate, and now you're passionate, very passionate, at least intellectually, about doing a mitzvah because you feel like your mitzvah is accomplishing something. I'm not taking out the garbage because I have no choice. I have appreciation for it, at least intellectually, that I want to do it. It's so much easier, so much more fun. The mitzvah is a different mitzvah when you do it like that. Why? But why? Why is learning Torah? The Torah is down here. How does that connect me to God? And we explained this at length in Tanya already. These are some of the ideas we covered in our earlier chapters of Tanya. Remember the example we said, when you hug the king, even if the king is wearing a bunch of layers of clothes, you're still hugging the king. So God is in the Torah, is dressed up in the Torah, and when you do the Torah, when you do a mitzvah, you're actually really connecting to God. So now you're passionate about the mitzvah and about Torah. If that's your motivation, you have passion involved. You're not just doing it because you have to. And therefore, it's fitting to love God and connect Him. No problem, you could learn the Torah by doing the 630 commandments. With our 3 garments that we already discussed at length, this idea of thought, speech, and action. That's by filling your mind and knowing the Torah, like we mentioned earlier, and doing the mitzvah. So behold, when you find the depth within yourself. So meditating takes you deeper within yourself. You open up into the recesses of your heart. You open up new channels, right? You got to find new energy. You got to dig deep. You got to find new energy. Now, your mind and your heart and your mouth are on the same length. You're not the rubber band being stretched and being pulled in 2 different directions because you have to act, but you don't. Your heart's not there. He at least get into the emotions from his intellect. That's there, and now his mouth and his mind are all on the same, at least intellectually on the same level. That he's learning Torah day and night. But could you imagine the guy beforehand? He was being stretched like a rubber band. He's learning day and night, but he's totally doing it because he has to, and he's not there. So now at least using meditation to connect to a deeper part of yourself, to appreciate Hashem. And your hands and your limbs are all doing mitzvahs. Like it's in his heart. So you imagine tell a guy to go to shul that he hates going to. How much could he do it already? Figure out, you have to go to shul, so you have to go to shul. But try and figure out a way to make it a good experience. At least intellectually appreciative where you're going. Fine, your fire's not turned on, but at least intellectually you appreciate it. Remember how we keep on saying how you do the mitzvah differently when you're behind it emotionally. So he says, look, you might not turn on the oven fully and feel the emotion in your heart, but you feel the emotion in your head, and that's backing the action that you're doing now, and therefore the action looks better. And he says something fascinating, which we're going to discuss in tomorrow's class. That when you could do an action out of intellectual emotion, Hashem hooks it up to the emotional emotion, And now you have the backing of not just intellectual emotions, but the full-on furnace is turned on fully, and it can heat up the whole house, even though you only have the pilot burning. You don't have the full oven burning. Hashem does it, and we'll discuss in tomorrow's class. Hashem connects the two together, runs a wire from one to another. The bottom line is, you at least got some stimulus, at least intellectually. That is the background, the motor now to the action. You're not doing because you have to, but you're doing because you want to, and you appreciate it. And Hashem will then, as we'll discuss tomorrow, connect that to the full-on emotion, and it'll have the same intensity and the same impact, as if you had that full-on emotion. Look, if you didn't have that intellect, at least the emotional intellect, the appreciation for it that's backing it, you wouldn't have done it at all. How long could you keep the rubber band stretched and you keep on doing it? You wouldn't do it. You need to get that intellect there. So the fact is, it is your emotion, although it's only intellectual emotion, at least it's only an appreciation for it. The reality is, it is your at least intellectual emotion that's backing it. Even a guy that you want to say he's an introvert and he just doesn't like talking to people, that's why he learns Torah all day. And the bottom line is, the fact is, everybody loves their physical body more naturally than godliness, and the only way for him to stop the rubber band from stretching so much is by somewhat getting in check his emotions to fit to his actions. And there is a stimulus that comes from his appreciation, at least, of his love and fear of Hashem. And tomorrow we'll talk about how Hashem then goes and wires it and connects it to the full-on furnace and gives it the same impact that a full-on furnace would have in this idea. That is the end of today's class. We're 9 minutes over. Any quick questions we could take? If not, we'll discuss it in tomorrow's lesson. Any quick questions? No? Was that too quick? Did we understand it, even though I rushed a little bit today?
I have a quick question, Rabbi.
Yes.
So is Torah studying then part of that meditation? Because through Torah study, you would then can get an appreciation for what it is that God asks of us, and therefore be able to then guide our emotions.
Good question. I would say it probably depends on which part of Torah study. I would think off the bat. I'm saying, like, if I'm learning about a law in detail, like my sons in yeshiva, we learn about very nitty-gritty, complex, difficult laws, I might not as easily get the emotion I need to feel the love of Hashem in that sense. I might actually, sometimes when I go and I study, I actually get it. The truth is, I do a lot of times actually do get emotionally connected, but probably certain areas help more than others to get it. It's basically, he's talking about this meditation, the greatness of Hashem. So you meditate on Hashem, the one who gave the Torah, will help you appreciate the actual Torah itself. Realize where the Torah comes from. Realize that it's a gift from God. It's a tremendous gift. That's why we make the blessing every day on the giving of the Torah. So it's a good question, but I bet you Torah also creates emotions. I would say too, but it probably is helpful to think about the giver of the Torah, which will definitely help us generate the emotions. I got to run.
Okay.
Yeah.
No,
Sorry.
I was just going to, does he also go through, does he give us examples of what kind of meditation or
I think he did today. He said about the infinite God and how everything comes from him. Those are the meditations. Yes, and he will. We're just starting. We're just getting started. Mm-hmm. One of the words used in these 2 chapters is we're manufacturing emotions. We're manufacturing emotions. That we're just getting started. We're going to discuss this for the next week, whatever it is, and then we're going to discuss it for the next month or so, how to get in touch with emotions that we already have. So we're just getting started, yes, and we're going to definitely cover a lot of it. Chapter 41, there's a lot of emotions, things to meditate on. I basically meditate on Hashem, the giver of the Torah, and the greatness and the infinite level of God. But we'll discuss more tomorrow. So stay tuned. We'll continue this idea tomorrow. I know it's a lot, but hopefully we'll bring some clarity as we continue to learn about it. Have an amazing day.
You.
We'll see you all tomorrow, same time, same place. All the best.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.